I cannot be silent.
Back when Eisenhower was the president, golf courses is where most of his time was spent. So I never really listened to what the president said, because in general I believed that the general was politically dead. But he always seemed to know when the muscles were about to be flexed, because I remember him saying something, mumbling something about a military-industrial complex.
As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our home nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problem, to bring about the changes it wanted. Their questions hit home, and I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. For the sake of those boys, for the sake of this government, for the sake of the hundreds of thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent.
Each one reach one, each one time.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work.
I cannot be silent.
Empowering the body, mind, and spirit. This is We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinckney.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the March 17, 2014 broadcast of We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinckney. Once again, we're broadcasting live on the Wolf Spirit Radio Network, and that can be found online at www.wolfspiritradio.com. Our guests tonight are really have been through the ringer and have worked real hard to try to find justice for their losses. We're calling tonight's program 9/11 Kills, A Tale of Two Fathers. And again, tonight our show's co-host, my partner in crime, Larry Pinckney, is with us. Larry, are you there?
Yeah, very much so. Great to be here, and also want to thank Gail for all of his work and his efforts as far as producing the show, and Wolf Spirit Radio, and most importantly, the audience, and want to welcome our two guests. So with that, I'll turn that back over to you, Bill.
Oh, thank you, Larry. And for those who don't know, may be tuning in for the first time, Larry Pinckney is a veteran of the Black Panther Party, has been a lifelong activist for peace and social justice, was a political prisoner for 10 years, self-authored his own successful defense through the United Nations, and has a prolific writer, and he has 40 years of work that's gathered on blackactivistwg.org, and that's blackactivistwg.org, and I want to encourage our listeners to check out Larry's work, whenever you can. But tonight, as I mentioned, we have a very special program, and we're very lucky to have the two guests tonight on our 9/11 Kills, A Tale of Two Fathers broadcast. New to the program tonight with us is Bob McIlvaine, father of the World Trade Center worker Bobby McIlvaine, who was killed by a bomb blast while entering the lobby of World Trade Center Tower 1 on the morning of 9/11/01. And we also have back on our show for a second time Dale Pierce. Dale is the father of Noah Pierce, an Iraq war veteran who died of suicide on July 26, 2007, after succumbing to the effects of PTSD related to his haunting war experiences in the 9/11 wars. And I do want to first bring on Bob, but before doing so, I want to read a little bit to tell you all a little more about Bob. Bob McIlvaine was one of the relatively few family members of those killed in the 9/11/01 attacks on the World Trade Center, who was able to recover the body of their loved one amongst the rubble of the World Trade Center towers after they had been blown up. An autopsy of Bob's son Bobby's body indicated that he had been killed by sections of the World Trade Center Tower lobby walls exploded outward by the bomb blast just as Bobby had been entering the lobby of the building. In February of 2002, Bob joined other 9/11 victims' family members of September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows to protest the U.S. government's use of their loved ones' deaths as justification for the U.S. bombing campaign in Afghanistan and later its March 2003 bombing and invasion of Iraq. After the wars had started, the leadership of the national anti-war organizations distanced themselves and their organizations from the 9/11 family members who began to question the government's official theory explaining the 9/11 attacks, rather than join and support them in a collective effort to end the 9/11 wars. The 9/11 family members and the many others who were questioning the government's official theory regarding the 9/11 attacks were then put into their own group known as the 9/11 Truth Movement, separate from the anti-war movement. It's been more than 12 years since the U.S. government launched its so-called War on Terror, justified by its official theory explaining the 9/11 attacks, with millions of people killed and maimed so far, to include nearly 7,000 U.S. troops killed in action and a rate of 22 military veterans committing suicide every day. Yet the national leadership of the anti-war organizations still refuse to embrace 9/11 truth as a necessary means to ending the 9/11 wars. Currently, Bob McIlvaine is once again working with the New York City Coalition for Accountability Now, NYC-CAN, C-A-N, on its High-Rise Safety Initiative ballot initiative. If approved by the New York City voters on November 4, 2014, the High-Rise Safety Initiative would require the New York City Department of Buildings to investigate the perfectly symmetrical, nearly free-fall speed collapse of World Trade Center Building 7 at 5:20 p.m. on 9/11/01 after not having been hit by an airplane and experiencing relatively minor office fires. Please go to www.highrisesafetynyc.org for more information. And I appreciate y'all hanging in there and listening to all that, but I did want to give you a decent idea of Bob's background before we bring him on. Bob, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, great.
Great job.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know you've been in quite a demand lately, especially with the High-Rise Safety Initiative. But at this point in time, and Dale, I just want to make sure you're with us too. Dale Pierce?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great, Dale. If you don't mind, I'd like to have Bob introduce himself and talk a little, and then we'll bring you into the conversation as well.
No problem.
Oh, great. Okay, Bob, there may be some people that are just hearing you for the first time, and with that in mind, I was hoping maybe you could give us a little bit of your story. We do have a 2-hour program, so don't feel rushed.
Okay, and cut me off if I'm talking too much, because so much is going on in the last 12 years. But my son Bobby, 26 years old, had just started. He worked in public relations for Burst and Marcella, and had just started at Merrill Lynch like 2 weeks before 9/11. He was just such a terrific writer that Merrill Lynch just hired him for that reason. They made him, they just made him vice president of media relations, just because they wanted him so much, because his only job was taking care of Merrill Lynch for Burst and Marcella. But anyway, of course, that day, 9/11, we went up immediately on Wednesday after 9/11, and on Friday, we actually found Bobby. Bobby was not in the rubble. Bobby was one of the first bodies found. At that time, I just, the coroner, everyone recommended that we didn't view the body because it was mutilated. But I feel horrible that I never did view the body. But we found him Thursday, and we actually took him home, and it was a full body. And of course, it was. I won't go into details exactly what was wrong with him, the injuries, but he was hit. And of course, I didn't know this at the time, but we were constantly trying to figure out how he died. He did not work in the towers. He worked at Merrill Lynch across the street. And it's taken me years to find this out, and it took me years to actually find a doctor at the morgue who actually examined Bobby. And probably more because I didn't have the guts to talk to him, I think. I just finally decided, well, I'm going to do this. So anyway, we took him home that week. We took him home Friday morning, and we buried him the following Tuesday or Wednesday. So, believe it or not, that we were actually one of the lucky ones that had a body, because up at Ground Zero on the 12th, the day after 9/11, it's so many people. I remember I spent so much time with people from Cantor Fitzgerald. We just kept walking around. Going to hospitals, going to command centers. There was just no bodies around. Bodies weren't being brought to the hospitals. Bodies weren't being brought to the morgue. There just wasn't that many bodies. And luckily, at the end of the week, we were down at Canal Street, and we actually, found Bobby. We actually went to the morgue. Juliana had provided a police car for us, and we went to the morgue, and we were able to identify him because he had some teeth remaining, and the police car took us, and Bobby just had dental work done, and we took it up to the dental office and identified him as Bobby, so that's how we identified him. There was nothing left in the face except the teeth. So I left it at that, and I just got involved, more with trying to stop the war as the years went on. No matter how bad I just felt that this was an international crime. I've been a history teacher. People are, I know the countries are so quick to go to war, and I just did not want, again, to use my son's name to start a war. So right before going into Iraq, certainly I was against Afghanistan. And then 2003, before we went into Iraq, in fact, it was on a Monday, I spent a whole week in Washington, D.C., doing nonviolent training. So I was going to be arrested the following day, on Tuesday morning, the 13th. And so I got arrested, and from then, I worked with Peaceful Tomorrow for about another couple of years, traveling around the world, talking that in my son's name I didn't want war. How evil these wars were. We're killing more people, and of course we never had a proper investigation. So why go to war? So that's the time I spent with Peaceful Tomorrows, and they were great years because and I really see why people get away from this 9/11 stuff, because I carry a lot of anger, and it's tough to keep peace in your heart because the anger I have, and I'll get into that briefly in a couple, about a minute, but I went to Colombia in Bogota, and I spoke to, a conference of like 2,500 people, and talking about the blowback of American foreign policy and why terrorism exists and so forth and so on. I used to, I went to Japan and walked from Nagasaki to Hiroshima and pushed a 5,000-pound stone commemorating all the people who died innocently in wars. And it was a great feeling. I felt good. I'd speak in villages. I'd stayed in Buddhist temples and the people I met. But it was very peaceful. I felt good about myself. I would talk in colleges. I would talk in high schools about how I didn't want war. And everybody wanted that message. But then, of course, I started going to the 9/11 Commission hearings, and as I made at least 95% of them. I'd drive down to Washington every meeting, sometimes stay the night. And basically it was after, I remember Condoleezza Rice when she spoke or when she testified, and she was just merely filibustering and just lying through her, I felt lying through her teeth, but would not give answers. And I just didn't like the entire makeup of the 9/11 Commission. They were obsequious, they weren't getting answers, they were just talking, people were filibustering, and finally I just, in fact it was after Condoleezza Rice, so I just lost my temper. I had an interview with Canadian Broadcasting, and I just was livid. I said, this is such accident. Well, I just started cursing. I lost my temper. Yes. And with that, all these people came over, and I said, these are all lies. This is a sham. These people have been lying to us from the very beginning. So that's when I really started my activism. So we're saying right around 2004 that I just, it's all a lie. It's a big sham. There was never an investigation. It was just, they were just pushing this off. So I figured, well, it's my job. My son was murdered. We did not have an investigation, so it's my job to investigate the death of my son. So finally, I was able to get a hold of a doctor up at the morgue that, identified Bobby. I went out and I sat with him for hours, and I didn't look at pictures of him because, again, he recommended that, and I can still look at the pictures if I wanted, but he had an outline of Bobby's body. And from that, and this is what I've been doing for so many years, is trying to speak to just on Bobby's death. I hate battling with 9/11 family members. I am not a scientist. I am not a politician. I am not academia. It's just, people, it's like when a parent talks, people think, well, he's talking out of emotion. And if I talk about the demolition of Building 7, how can I prove it? I'm not an architect. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an engineer. I can talk about, a lot of things. I can talk about the Pentagon. I certainly can talk about NORAD. But no one knows how Bobby died. So I've spent a lot of time, and this is, my job as a parent. How did Bobby die? Well, he worked up in, he lived up 96 between 1st and 2nd, or 66 between 1st and 2nd, took the subway down, and that morning he had to be at work. Now, Merrill Lynch was across the street from the North Tower. So he wasn't supposed to be at the North Tower. But, of course, when the planes hit, there must have been 100 phone calls made to him, and, of course, he didn't answer. So through the years, I wasn't able to come to these conclusions, but I actually talked to someone who was actually behind Bobby, didn't see him, was probably on the same subway, and the only reason this person lived was that you get off the Fulton Street subway, and I don't know how many people are familiar with, but that would be on the east side of Tower 1. And he walked down, and he, of course, would walk through the plaza beyond Tower 1 and then cross West Street to go to his job at Merrill Lynch. So I don't know exactly what Bobby was doing, but because of the nature of his injuries, and this is very important, the 9/11 Commission hearings, and this just shows you what, they just made up things. They lied. They didn't even lie. They made up things to finish out the report. And, of course, everyone knows that one person developed the outline of the 9/11 Commission report. But anyway, they spent 2 lines, page 285 of the 9/11 Commission report, describing how one fireball came down an elevator, blew up floor 77, blew up 22, blew up the lobby, blew up all these sub-basement levels. All right, what happened with Bobby? He was walking in, and I don't know if he died in the lobby or as he was walking into the lobby. because his injuries, he had a lot of lacerations on his chest, and his face was decimated, and his one arm was blown off. Now, an important thing is that Bobby did not have any burns. He had post-mortem light burns on him. And that's where I can't figure out exactly. And he was supposedly one of the first 10 people found and taken away. So my assumption is he might have been walking in either on the east side or on the west side. I'm not sure. But this is the most important thing. This is what I talk about all the time now. There was tremendous explosions going on before the towers were hit by planes and instantaneously when the planes came in. So my thing is, I go around talking about, I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, because the way that the 9/11 Commission report lied, Muslims had nothing to do with the murder of my son, because the planes had nothing to do with the murder of my son, or the death of my son. Mm-hmm. There's so many, so much testimony of people in the basement that these explosions were going off. So much testimony of a firefighter coming into the west side and the windows being broken out in the lobby. Now, if anybody, I don't know how many people that are listening have been into the North Tower, these were big windows, they were thick windows. And the 9/11 Commission report says, well, Fireball created this havoc. Well, this is an impossibility. And just a real quick stat, or not a stat, but a tidbit about what a fireball is. The size of the North Tower is just over 2 million cubic feet or cubic yards. Now that everybody, that's a lot of cubic yards. All right, a fireball. The plane coming into the North Tower, we're talking maybe 10,000 gallons of fuel. Okay, and of course, a lot of that, at least half of it was blown up at the instant of the plane hitting. So let's just say possibly 5,000 gallons of fuel were remaining. Now, the plane was coming in, it was tipped a little, so it didn't go in square. So you had all this, say, 5,000, and I'm sure it's less than that because a lot of it started fires, so a lot of that fuel was taken over by fires. So the 9/11 Commission talks about the fuel coming down the elevator shafts. The popular mechanics debunkers saying that fuel coming down the elevator shafts, and constantly putting this plural in their shafts. Well, that's an impossibility. There was only one elevator shaft that fuel could have gone all the way down to the sub-basement 6th level. Only one. You had two other elevators that went up to the top to the towers, but they both stopped, and they weren't in service that day, and they both stopped at B1 level. And the towers went down to B6 level. So the only one that could have been was this freight elevator, and this Arbuto Griffith, who was running that elevator, and he was approximately on the, approximately the 40th floor when the planes hit. The cables were cut, and his elevator started going down, and he thought he was going to die. Then emergency brakes came in, and all elevators have emergency brakes, and the doors blew in when he got down to approximately the B1 or B2 level. So the fact that the doors of the elevator blew in means there had to be an explosion there also. Right. So the whole story, the fact that all these explosions were going off, and I'm not even talking about when the buildings came down, that these explosions were taking place in the basement and well, I don't know necessarily inside the lobby, but from the explosions coming up from the basement level were blowing out the elevator doors in there. And people have to remember, the tower, it was like 3 different buildings in the tower. Each level had their own set of elevator shafts. It was a 3-tiered system. None of them ran down from floor 106 all the way down to the lobby level. You get elevators at the lobby, take you up to the 23rd floor, 23rd to, or to the 40th floor, 40th to the 60th or whatever, 70th, and 70th up to the top. So there was not one elevator there was only one elevator shaft that could have brought a fireball down into the lobby. All the others, it's an absolute impossibility that fireballs created any damage or the damage that was took place in the lobby and in the basement levels. So my thing is to instead of globalizing all about 9/11. My son he died. He died instantly. He died from a blast, and we're talking bombs, and we're talking bombs that went off before the planes hit. And my thing there is, then who killed him? Well, obviously it wasn't someone from the planes. The planes had nothing to do with my son's death. So I start there. Then my investigation has to start there. Well, who was the head of security? Kroll Security. Who covered up this thing? Well, the 9/11 Commission covered it up. Who created the 9/11 book was Philip Zelikow. There's a man that should be in prison for the rest of his life because he wrote an outline of the whole book before the book got started. He initiated everything, and they hid everything. They refused to talk about bombs. It's like no bombs ever went off. Yet they heard testimonies of so many people, of so many firefighters, so many cops, so many EMS workers, and they just refused to acknowledge that any bombs went off. So that's the thing that they're really trying to hide. You know, certainly if Muslims are involved in this, then they would have been investigating that and said, oh, yeah, a bunch of Muslims got in there and put bombs in there so that they bring these buildings down. But that part of it is totally ignored. And, of course, we go to Building 7. At the end of the day, 526, well, that comes down in a perfect demolition. I was even on Geraldo's show after he was blasting the 9/11 community or the truth community left and right. You know, he thought everyone, you know, they're always called wackos. Well, Tony Zamboni and I were on the show, and looking at the thing, if you just look at it and, you know, talking to him, he said, well, you're right. That's a controlled demolition. And here's, you know, supposedly a right-wing show, Fox, you know, on Fox, and he's there to blast us, and he was very nice to us. Even Huckabee, afterwards, he was waiting to come on, and he said, God, it looks like a controlled demolition to me. Well, but it goes into a black hole. That was the end of it. So if anyone wants to spend any time to look at this and to do a little homework, you have to come to the conclusion, just on that part of it, that these bombs were planted. We're talking detonations, which are extremely powerful. Like a fireball has the power of, like, you know, if it bursts out of a elevator of approximately, you know, 325 meters a second. Well, a detonation starts at the power of 1,325 meters per second, or approximately. So detonation is such a powerful thing. That's what I think hit Bobby. It wasn't a fire, but it was a detonation with the force of over 1,300 meters per second that hit him and killed him instantly. Now, I'm not saying a fireball couldn't come down because of the vapor. A vapor might have come down from the tower, down 50 and, you know, blown out somewhere, but it just doesn't have the power. A fireball wouldn't have the power to blow out these windows. The lobby is, each floor is approximately 208 feet square. So you're talking big, big buildings. And there really is no signs in the lobby of fire. It's just a massive detonation that was going off. So I go around to make it simple. I don't have to do battle with 9/11 family members. I'm not going to do battle with scientists or academia, because they're all, especially academia, they're afraid to say anything. You know, some of the most respected people, especially at Princeton, that Bobby had at Princeton, you know, people I used to love, but they're so afraid to talk about 9/11. So I try to simplify it. I'm just a parent that's done the investigation of my own son's death. Right. And no one's done that. No one's investigated anything as far as, you know, how their son, daughter, husband, wife died. Because most of them, they didn't have anything. But I do have something, and I have the pictures of it, or I have the outline. And he died from, you know, he didn't die from a fireball because he had post-mortem burns, and they're very minor burns from, you know, like he just came back from Miami. Right. So that's where I sort of surmised that he might have been outside and got hit from an explosion, but it was so strong that it did the damage to his, you know, his face and his chest and arm. And again, he died instantly, and of course, you know, no one was able to, you know, I never did get the cell phone, but he was blown out of his shoes. I did get his wallet. I still have his wallet, and we still have some remaining parts of him that, you know, we got years later. So that's what I do. And I try to keep it simple, but people get so glassy-eyed, they don't want to hear what I have to say about that because it's just, it hits people too much. I've been doing this for so many years that I really want people to know how he died. And it was a horrible death. Well, everybody's death was horrible. But, you know, that's the story. But people, you know, especially the news media, you know, they're probably more so than anyone that I blame for, you know, what happened on 9/11, because without the news media, they've never been able to do something like this. But they just don't want to hear it. And that's basically my story.
Well, thank you, Bob. And I've been aware of you for years, and what some people might not know, that they were not even going to have a 9/11 White House appointed commission if not for the 9/11 family members. You know, and there's been that myth out there for years that, you know, if you're questioning the official story of 9/11, you're offending the family members. Well, it was the family members who were the ones who started asking questions and demanding answers, and you were one of them. And I think the American people have failed you, and in turn failed everyone else that's died in the name of 9/11, including our friend Dale Pierce's son, who was sent off to war, the 9/11 wars, based on the 9/11 lie. And you know, there comes a point in time, Bob, where you know, folks can't claim ignorance anymore. I mean, it's been 12 years. You know, fires fueled by office furnishings and kerosene-based jet fuel do not blow 110-story steel frame concrete skyscrapers up into dust. And you know, you really don't have to be an architect or an engineer or a scientist to get it. You know, it's a fraud, man, and that's all we need to know. Larry, it sounds like the fireball that Bob was describing. I was thinking of the magic bullet with JFK. You know, but I had a question for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
Like you said, Phil, it's very obvious. I mean, not only do we not have to be quote-unquote rocket scientists or any kind of scientists other than people who search for the truth, that's the only thing we have to be, and people who use our common sense, just our common sense. As Brother Malcolm X said, you know, too often we are bamboozled, and we have allowed ourselves, too many of us, have allowed ourselves to be bamboozled by things that make no sense whatsoever. Absolutely not even common sense. For example, Dale was referring to how the building came down, and obviously, and I'm talking about one of the buildings, or two of the buildings, it's controlled demolition. Clearly, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. I've seen many buildings destroyed through controlled demolition. All right, when you have buildings of this size and this height, it makes no sense whatsoever that basically all you get when two airliners hit the building, or buildings, plural, two of them, that, you know, all you get is dust. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's outrageous. And I'm very angry about it. It angers me deeply, not only in terms of the lies that the American people are being told and people around the world are being told, but this cover-up is continuing. So I want to salute both of our guests, both of you. Keep on. Keep on. We're with you, and there are a lot more people than you may think who are beginning to awaken and to question. No more 9/11 wars. I just had to say that. I was just getting very, very angry as I was listening to the pain and thinking of the pain of now hundreds of thousands of other people around the world as a result of these 9/11 wars.
Yes. Thanks, Larry. And that was a big part of our program tonight, was to bring together the 9/11 false flag attack itself, connect the dot with the 9/11 wars based on the 9/11 lie. And before we get to Dale Pierce to talk about that, I did want to ask Bob McIlvaine a question. I do remember when Bob was invited on Geraldo Rivera's Fox TV show with Tony Zambodi of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And my hunch is, Bob, that you all didn't end up on that program unless there was enough pressure from the American people, and in particular Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth and the people that are active with it, that forced the issue. Am I mistaken, or was there another? Was that not the reason y'all got on with?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't be a proponent of saying that our efforts forced that issue. I just think maybe they were a little curious.
Okay, see, you were there. You know better.
Yeah, they were very nice. I mean, from the time we got there, Geraldo came out and talked to us before we came onto the show. He's extreme, and he said, "Look, we don't have that much time." He didn't give us the questions he was going to ask, but he said, of course, we're going to talk about Building 7. And it was just absolutely delightful. And but I don't know, because he was so strongly against everything the 9/11 Truth community was doing, even like a week before. So I think curiosity more than anything. And, of course, they want to, be part of the news. And, this was all coming out. I don't think they were necessarily pressured into doing it, but the way they dropped it immediately, again, it went into a black hole. So I don't know. You might be right, but I think it was more curiosity than anything. They just went, ratings also. They wanted to get someone on. At least everyone knows that they began to talk about it, but I don't really think they were under that much pressure, to tell you the truth. But
okay,
you might be right.
I do know that there were quite a few activists with the Building What campaign, and then later Remember Building7.org that were really making a lot of noise. So. And now with the high-rise safety NYC.org, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But we're the answer. Larry and I talk about this each month when we're on air. We got to stop thinking that someone's going to come along and save us. We are the answer ourselves. And again, I believe that the American people have failed you, Bob, and family members, and anyone else that deserves justice for the attacks of 9/11, and everyone else that's been killed and harmed otherwise in the name of the 9/11 lie. It's long past time to claim ignorance on this. But at this point in time, I'd like to introduce the listeners to our other special guest who's been with us before, Dale Pierce. And as we mentioned earlier, Dale Pierce is the father of Noah Pierce, a former U.S. soldier in the Iraq War who suffered severe PTSD and who, like more and more soldiers and veterans are doing now at an increasing rate, tragically took his own life, as described in the article, The Life and Lonely Death of Noah Pierce, by Ashley Gilbertson, who wrote that article in the fall of 2008 and was originally printed in the Virginia Quarterly Magazine. Again, the title of the article, The Life and Lonely Death of Noah Pierce. And Dale has a lot to say about the buildings and how they come down or shouldn't come down. Dale has also worked in high-rise buildings in Houston, Texas, and San Francisco, California, and has an understanding of how they are constructed. Not only does Dale speak publicly about his son Noah and the veteran suicide epidemic, he also publicly questions the U.S. government's official 9/11 theory, which is used to justify the U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he shares the evidence provided by the over 2,000 architects and engineers of AE911truth.org, which demonstrates that the World Trade Center Twin Towers and World Trade Center Building 7 in New York City were brought down in controlled demolition on 9/11/01. Again, Dale Pierce was a featured guest on our September 16, 2013 broadcast of We Cannot Be Silent with Phil Restino and Larry Pinckney, and he spoke of his recent work with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and his efforts in bringing the evidence of the 9/11 false flag attack to the national anti-war organizations such as Veterans for Peace. Dale was joined on that September program by Bill Simon, a Vietnam veteran and current president of the Sonoma County, California chapter of Veterans for Peace. And that's VFP Chapter 71. And we do have that broadcast archived on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/We Cannot Be Silent. And at this point in time, we'd like to welcome our other special guest, Dale Pierce. Dale, are you with us?
Got you loud and clear.
Oh, great. Welcome back to the program. We certainly appreciate you coming back and spending time with us tonight. I know this is not an easy topic for either you or Bob, and again, we do appreciate it. Why don't we pass the mic over to you, Dale, and let you tell us and the audience a little bit of your story.
Yeah, Phil, thank you for inviting me. And Larry, it's a pleasure to share the airways with you. As a very young child, I spent time in South Texas in the early 60s, so we have made incredible change. Obviously, it's not enough, but what a change it's been. I went back to Texas in the 80s and worked offshore as a commercial diver, and eventually ended up in Sonoma County, where I joined in the electricians union. And I was able to work in high-rises in different cities, Houston and San Francisco, and indeed see how these things ain't going to fall down in a fire. So, Bob, it's incredible. Your work has basically, you and Richard Gage are what brought me out of the 911 closet, so to speak. And the more I started looking at the issues and situations my son and other veterans and soldiers went through in Iraq, the anger I got. And finally, when I saw how Bob was taking abuse and Richard Gage was taking abuse, it was time to step up to the plate and do it. So I started working with architects and engineers just to get educated, and got a good idea of exactly the questions I needed to ask people. And that's when the real hardship started to happen. You know, you were hitting too close to home. My mother was raised under the Nazis. She was 9, living in Berlin when the Nazis took over. They had a front row seat to the entire war. They were there when the Russians showed up and fled to America. The stories are still coming out about the insanity of the people. They would not deal in reality. And a great book called 22 Cells in Nuremberg by Douglas M. Kelly, M.D., did research on the Nazis. He had access to them as the Nuremberg trials were taking place. And the passage in here states, it's scientifically proven that once the emotional mind takes over, the intellectual mind just doesn't work. And that's what happened on September 11th. We all know it was associated with our foreign policy, so it became a taboo subject immediately. And basically, we're at the point now where we can honestly ask ourselves, where are our professionals? Every profession should have had the expertise to spot this. Simple contractors should have spotted something wrong when they were allowing people onto the rubble. They're trained in lead and asbestos removal from homes and know the consequences. If they allowed that, they would be fined and lose their license. Architects, they know better than that. Their buildings don't fall down like that. Engineers, my God, their code of ethics demands that they serve the public's best interest. And here they're ignoring all of this evidence. The biggest situation in our history and all of our professionals. When I was 16, I was able to join the California Division of Forestry, and I was a seasonal forest firefighter. And I was trained in basic firefighting science, tactics, and crime scene prevention. And right away on September 11th, I knew something was up. The black smoke and the claims of raging fires and buildings collapsing and presidents that don't disappear when the Secret Service is supposed to grab him when we're under attack. Instead, he sits in a classroom for when he decides to leave. The whole air defense, let these guys fly around for a couple hours. I knew something was up, but my son joined the military 2 days after September 11th, and obviously I wanted to stop the war. And my mindset was at the time, basically the information I was gathering really had me suspicious that they let it happen. I had finished Calmears Johnson's book, Blowback, explaining the difficulties we could have with our dealings with Afghanistan and what we had created. I mean, real interesting thing of cognitive dissonance. If you remember, the 82 Challenger space shuttle mission was dedicated by Ronald Reagan to the Taliban. Of, the freedom fighters that were the moral equivalent to our founding fathers. And then when the war rolls around after September 11th, these are filthy animals that have been doing this for thousands of years. So you can see we've been lying to ourselves as a nation. And coming back to our professionals, it's time to start asking our professionals what's up. The campaign that Bob's got going with the New York Safety High-Rise Initiative is brilliant. The pictures are great. I think if we showed up, people that lost loved ones in the wars, veterans that served in the war, maybe lost some limbs, if we showed up to the AIA convention in Chicago this coming June and asked these architects a series of questions like, gee, do you know about Building 7? And then we can get a slightly more complicated, like, how does it fall down in free fall speed, and how do you feel about molten metal or disappearing evidence? And their code of ethics demands that they be able to answer these questions. They are required to, their public safety is paramount. They're definitely required to upgrade their education, and if they can't speak intelligently about the biggest event in our history, that's grounds for disciplinary action through the AIA. So I think it'd be incredible to have Bob, myself, or other activists just simply ask these questions to these architects, and we can write down their name and number and write an article about it. So these are a lot of the issues we're dealing with there, is just try and get past the cognitive dissonance of the general public and find ways to steer them toward the information that architects and engineers are providing for us. Yes.
We've got to put the people on the spot. Yes, there's cognitive dissonance, and that's where basically the person's brain can't handle it. Their view of the world just can't accept the reality of this false flag attack. So a switch shuts off. But there's also many people, Dale, that if forced to look at the evidence just for a few minutes, there's no way you can say that the official story is the way it happened, and I think a lot of it is the American people are comfortable and they use the false patriotism or willful ignorance as a matter of convenience. And your idea of showing up to the architects convention in Chicago this coming June and putting these people on the spot, because they're not the American people are not voluntarily calling these criminals to account. And my God, how many millions of lives have to be destroyed before we as a people will do what we have to do and deal with this. Larry, I can babble on. Did you want to touch on that yourself? That phenomenon there?
I want to first of all say, hey, Dale, it's really good to hear your voice, man. And just really, really good to hear your voice. And I'm so glad that you are continuing to carry on, and you haven't given up. In fact, to the contrary, you've intensified. So thank you so much. Along with you, of course, Bob, both of you, thank you so much. What I want to say very briefly is simply this, that and I want to tie in the 9/11 lie. Some people call it a myth. I just call it what it is. It's a lie. The 9/11 lie, with the fact that this is going on, it's being carried on. This, when I say it, I'm referring to the murders are being carried on through the 9/11 wars, and the people, the men and women, young men and women in particular, who are involved in these wars at the behest of government that not only back during the Bush era, but a government right today in the Obama era is continuing to lie and to cover up the horrors that are being perpetrated as a result of what occurred on 9/11. So I just want to. I think it's really important that we link the two together, because they are linked. And yes, some people's minds do shut down, but a lot of people's minds don't shut down. Some people are like me, who get really, really pissed off when they find out that they've been duped, bamboozled. And I think it's time for us to get really, really, not that you all aren't, but we need to get on the plate, step up to the plate, and urge that other people step up to the plate. So I wish you the very, very best. I hope you will be going to that convention. These people, these so-called professionals, I say so-called because if a person is a professional, then that means they have morals and ethics, or that's what it's supposed to mean. Thus far, I've seen very little of that. So we're in this struggle. And I just wanted to say that. I want to be the encouraging factor on the show tonight for whatever it's worth. Both of you gentlemen, both of our guests, you're people's warriors, and that's what we need. You're struggling not only, Bob, you're not only struggling for your son, Dale, for your son, you're struggling for all the sons and daughters out there. And that's absolutely necessary. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Well, Bob and Dale, I want to stop these wars as you guys do, and I want to see justice for the victims that have, such as your own sons and everyone else that's still waiting for justice. And I think 12 and a half years is long past time to get real about this. And again, Larry and I talk about this every chance we can. We are the answer, the American people, and it's long past time that we deal with 9/11, Until we deal with the 9/11 lie, we're going to continue to get what we get. And not only are the whole world suffering for our inaction. I joined Veterans for Peace myself in the summer of 2005 after hearing this fellow who was a former president of Veterans for Peace, Mike Ferner, give a fiery speech about how not only was it our responsibility as citizens, but our sworn duty as veterans to, at that point in time, call for impeaching this criminal president. At that time, it was a white Republican, and the Veterans for Peace was very adamant about doing nothing less than calling for impeachment of the criminal president. And in that very same speech, Larry, he referred to the German people that Dale was speaking of in World War II that sat back and were good Germans. He was saying that history does not, this fellow Mike Ferner was saying that history does not allow for us to do that, you know, and that we're complicit in the crimes. Again, at that time, all this was the white Republican Bush's crimes. And then once the black Democrat took office in 2009, these organizations that were waving the Constitution in the air and saying it's nothing less than our absolute duty to hold these folks to account, totally switched gears. And am I angry? And am I going to keep speaking about this? You're damn right I'm going to keep speaking about this, because these are the groups that put themselves out to be those folks who are dedicated to stopping the wars. And they're always asking you for your money, and they're leading you on a merry-go-round. And
that's right. That's right, Phil. And let me say that, yeah, they're always asking you for your money. They're trying to sell you books. They're telling you what basically you already know anyway. But let me just jump on this point that you made. And you're absolutely correct, my brother. Absolutely correct. You get this nominally black Democrat in there who has not only done the same thing that Bush did, but he's Bush on steroids in terms of the wars, and this, not just the wars, many other things as well. But I'm honing in on the wars in Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., Yemen, Libya. The list goes on and on and on. My point is that we have got to accept responsibility. These things are being done in our names. Our own sons and daughters, mothers, fathers, cousins, aunties, uncles are dying, as are people's relatives around the world from other countries on Mother Earth. So this has got to stop. So I, too, as you can imagine, am damn angry myself. And it's time for us to say, we're just not going to take this anymore. We're just not going to take it anymore. Willful ignorance is complicity, and we will not be complicit.
Colonel Bob Bowman, Dr. Robert M. Bowman, who sadly lost his battle with cancer this past August 2013. And Bob Bowman was the former director of the Star Wars program when it was top secret under Presidents Ford and Carter in the 1970s. And the program was supposed to be a missile defense program, but actually it was being used as a first strike offensive weapon. And Bob was asked to come out of retirement, and as the former director of the program, gave up a comfortable career in industry and became a whistleblower. And with that, death threats, IRS hassles, loss of friendships, etc. But Bob was a longtime member of Veterans for Peace and Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and he was a celebrated member of Veterans for Peace. Our obituary, our tribute piece mentioned that he was a 4-time keynote speaker at the Veterans for Peace National Conventions, and then when we had his widow, Maggie Bowman, at our chapter meeting in February, she corrected us and said he was the keynote speaker at 5 Veterans for Peace National Conventions. a real celebrated member. And I'm emphasizing this because after 9/11, Bob and Dale, Bob Bowman, as a nuclear and aeronautical engineer with many degrees and from Caltech, etc., came out and said, look, it was hard to argue with his credentials that fire fueled by office furnishings and kerosene-based jet fuel cannot make two 110-story steel-frame concrete skyscrapers blow up into dust. And he also mentioned, his experience as a fighter pilot, and not only that, an actual NORAD interceptor pilot. He said, look, 4 known to be hijacked jumbo jet airliners do not fly around in U.S. airspace for an hour and a half and not get intercepted unless there's some kind of stand down. So that's all you need to know. Very simple. And here you had somebody with Bob's credentials that you could put out there and let him take all the arrows. You know what I mean, Larry? And there he is. He's right there on a silver platter. The anti-war movement, the 9/11 wars, these wars are totally in the name of the 9/11 lie. And here the anti-war movement had somebody like Bob Bowman there to you couldn't have more credibility on both fronts there, and he could have been put forward and taken all the arrows, and they threw him under the bus. They distanced themselves from questioning 9/11, and this has to be known. This has to be exposed, and I want anyone listening here that truly wants these wars to end, truly wants justice for the victims of the 9/11 crimes, to look up Veterans for Peace. veteransforpeace.org, look up their phone number, find the chapter in your neck of the woods, click on the Find the Chapter Near You button, and confront them. Ask them, hey, why are you not emphasizing 9/11 as a means to ending the 9/11 wars? And make them answer for it. So there we go. We do have a call from the 386 area code. Caller, are you with us?
I'm with you, Phil.
Oh, boy, we know that voice, don't we, Larry?
Well,
Yes, we do.
Hi, Phil and Larry, and thanks, Dave, for taking my call. This is Kathy in Florida, and I just wanted to call in and commend the two guests, Dale and Bob, for coming on and being interviewed this evening. And I just have to commend them because I'm a nurse, and I do work. I've worked for years with people that really suffer from depressions. I deal with a lot of loss, and for these two gentlemen to not just sit around being depressed after they lost their sons, but actually get out there and try to find answers and try to get something going with the information they have, and then knowing that so far we have not had any real investigation. They have kept up the fight. I just had to call in and commend them because I'm listening to both of them, and I'm very touched by their stories, and I really don't have a question except to say that most of the people I talk to, if I do mention 9/11, I work with some people that were just in middle school at the time it happened, and that are probably 19 or so now, maybe 20, and they go, what was that all about? Well, I remember something about that, but they don't really know, and they don't really care. And the other people that I might talk to about it, that might care, will say, yeah, but what can we do about it? So that's just the workforce. I can't say too much there, but I do once in a while bring up the subject in my own way. And I don't know what to do about that, but that might be kind of a question. to people that are out there in the community that have that type of an answer. Well, what can we do about it? Do you have any feedback for that type of a response? Otherwise, I'm just going to enjoy the rest of the show. I thanks a lot, guys.
Well, thanks, Kathy. Hang on just for a minute. Let's pass that off to our guests, Dale Pierce and Bob McIlvaine. Did either of you have a response to Kathy's comment?
Yeah, absolutely, Dale Pierce. Yeah, basically just learn the basics about number 7. Stick to the basics, because September 11th was such a broad event. We had the Pentagon and 4 airplanes and 19 Muslims, and people will just take one of those things and run the other direction. If we could just stick to the science of number 7. And what I'm doing as a experienced firefighter, I'm hitting up architects, engineers, and my fellow firefighters of 2 issues. With architects and engineers, it's they haven't changed the building codes. So if they want to agree with the original conspiracy, they've been sitting on their death, which is against their code of ethics, and they haven't changed the building codes. And firefighters, I just received a letter from a concerned firefighter in London making fun of us, and it's not very pretty. He's basically saying, going through our high-rise firefighting tactics manual, and there's no instructions here how to handle a building that's going to collapse in 6.5 seconds, which in this district happens due to small office fires. Can you please elaborate? Because basically, if what you're saying is true, we need to change firefighting tactics, fire insurance. In fact, we need to find a whole new component to make these buildings out of. We couldn't even get close to them. So the rest of the world is making fun of us. And if we can educate ourselves in just the simple questions that architects and engineers have, and approach firefighters at stations or when they're on the street or at fundraisers, wherever, and remind them it's their code of ethics. They lost 343 firefighters. And like Bob, if he was to show up at the AIA convention, it's free. You could walk in there with a nice T-shirt on of the New York High Rise Initiative, which is a very inviting T-shirt. You don't have the 911 truth and all that and building up anxiety in these people. You're inviting them to ask what happened to that building, and you can remind them of their duty as architects. So it's kind of like Stalag 17, that film where they're all locked up and they found out the rats that were amongst them. And that's what we got with our professionals. They've all cashed out because it's in their financial benefit.
Right.
Upton Sinclair quote there, you can't convince a man of something that his job depends on.
Okay.
Wow, that's something to think about, certainly. And isn't that the gist of what this high-rise safety nyc.org initiative's about, Bob? That, hey, if as Dale mentioned, if these folks are going to use their official theory that for the explaining the buildings coming down on 9/11, then they have to abide by it. Can you give us a little more insight, Bob McIlvaine, on the high-rise safety initiative?
Well, the basic thing is, which is, I think the beauty of the whole thing is, and why I support it, because, obviously, I've told Richard, I've told Ted many a times, when I speak, I still want to speak about Bobby and how Bobby died. And, I am not an architect, I'm not an engineer, and Dale's exactly right, keep to the simple facts, but the beauty of the high-rise safety initiative, to put it forth in New York City, is to tell all the people that, hey, we were told that a building came down because of fire. Well, we got a big-time problem. That means every building in New York City, if ever has a fire, there's a great chance it's going to come down, according to the official report. So therefore, if this initiative is passed, it's putting it on the building codes, the building commission, to investigate. And the vote will be, if all the signatures are gotten, and if the vote goes through and we win in November, then the building commission has to take over and investigate 9/11 for the good of all the buildings within New York City, because the people of the city have to realize, geez, we got a monumental problem here, that a fire can bring down a building that easily. You know, of course, in the history of buildings, it's never happened that way.
Sure.
So that's the whole idea of it, to keep it simple and keep the emotion of 2 other buildings coming down and get into the science of that. Just keep it to one, as Dale was saying, one simple thing. Building 7 came down because of fires, and it's never happened before. Well, we got a big problem in New York City then. If any other building catches fire, then we have the danger of that building coming down. So it's up to the building commission then to investigate that. And if the vote goes through, it has to investigate Building 7. And again, taking the emotion of the other 2 buildings out and figuring out whether they're pulverized, more detonations put in there, so forth and so on. It's a very simple thing. We're just doing Building 7, which I agree with. But I will tell people I'm more concerned about people knowing how my son died, and of course, segueing into the other 2 buildings, that they were also brought down by detonations or controlled demolition, whatever. So, but it just simplifies everything. And Dale was exactly right in saying that it will keep it easy, keep the emotion out of it, that, hey, this whole city's in big trouble because we're going to have all these buildings collapsing because of fire, because that's what the government told us. And it isn't true. So let's do an investigation. And that's, in essence, what's going to happen.
Not let them get away with this lie. You know, we can't let them slide. And that, again, that comes back to we the people. And I believe that, those signatures needed to get on the ballot, Bob, are not just going to appear out of thin air. It's going to take people getting involved. And again, the website is highrisesafetynyc.org. We want to encourage the listeners to get involved and ask others to do the same. We do have a question from the chat room, guys. It's please ask the guests how we rekindle interest in 9/11 truth, even when the independent progressive media has dropped the subject and the search for truth. And before I'd like to touch on that, I believe the way to do that is to relate the current wars with the 9/11 lie. You know, we still have these wars. We still have kids coming home in body bags or without any arms or legs or what have you. Or we still have 22 military veterans taking their own lives each and every day because of the PTSD and all the things they did and were exposed to in these 9/11 wars. So I think that right there is a great way of connecting 9/11 truth to what's happening today. And there's anti-war organizations that have been chapters all over the country. I know the membership has been dwindling since the Democrat got in office and the leadership shifted priorities. But they exist. You can go to veteransforpeace.org and find the Veterans for Peace chapters in your area. CodePinkAlert.org for the women anti-war activists. U.S. Labor Against the War has been sending a lot of stuff out lately, talking about 11th anniversary of the Iraq War. No mention of the 3rd anniversary of Obama's shock and awe on Libya and all the death that's been going on in Africa since. But these organizations are out there. Their stated purpose is to stop the war. The war is based on the 9/11 lie. There's your connection. But that's what I had to say about it. Did the guests have anything? Again, the question, how do we rekindle interest in 9/11 truth when even the independent progressive media has dropped the subject and the search for truth? I'm curious about the word progressive. Are they meaning the left-leaning folks that some have been covering, providing left cover for Obama's crimes, or just progressive thinking. I don't know, but I'll pass that off to our guests.
Oh yes, Bob. My experience with the press, it's almost like a lost cause with the progressive community, with the Republican, conservative community. And I'm lucky in the fact that, like, last year I did a show with I sort of go out to the international part of all this, because it seems like times I've been in Europe, South America, people really want to know what happened here, and they really are searching for the truth. And like, I was on the international National Geographic, and they came up and did an interview with me, and they have an hourly show every week, and they really wanted to do it. In fact, they came with 9/11 T-shirts, and they gave me 5 minutes, but and it went out to, like, oh Jesus, over 70 million people, 120 countries, and one question they asked me, so, well, who did this? And I said, I'd rather not talk about that, because it's just, we could sit here for 2 hours talking about who did it, but I would rather tell people Muslims, and again, I can prove easily Muslims had nothing to do with my son's death. Then we can get into, we don't have any proof that they were on the planes, and get all, NORAD and all that. But I said, I'd rather the world know that everything that's happened since 9/11 is based on lies. And the thing is, people have listened to that around the world. You get such great feedback from people around the world when you talk about this. But in the United States, I get so depressed. I mean, when I did a little, after bin Laden died, or supposedly was killed back in 2011, and I had all sorts of, New York Times called me, the Jersey paper, and of course the Philadelphia Inquirer. They wanted an interview, and I told them what I thought about what happened. I said, I don't think he died then. He died back in 2001, and I said, you don't have to, believe me. Just do a little research. You're a journalist. You can find this out. There's a lot of information out there about bin Laden dying in December of 2001. Well, anyway, all of them just ignored me, absolutely ignored me. And the only people they wanted on were 9/11 family members saying, oh, God, thank God that bastard is dead, and I hope he rots in hell for eternity. I hope his family rots, and so forth and so on. Well, one person from the New York Inquirer, the Philadelphia Inquirer, called me back. She said, Bob, I really want to apologize. She said, my editor, and this is her, telling me flat out on the phone, my editor told me I cannot put anything you said. Now, the only thing I said, that he might have been killed. There's plenty of information out there that he was killed. And she said the editor would not allow it. And, of course, the other papers, Jersey paper, New York, none of them would print what I had to say. And I wasn't saying anything controversial. So it really, we are, can I just tell you a real quick story? I ran into a couple of Russian people about 3 or 4 years ago. My parents, or my wife and I were down at Ground Zero. And two couples came up to us and shook our hands and saying they're from Moscow, and they wanted to thank us, or thank me for what I've done. They've seen DVDs I've done, and they said to me, says, in the United States, it's just unbelievable how much people, this is Russian people telling me this, how much they're in a bubble here in the United States. She said, at least in Russia, we know what the papers are doing. We know it's propaganda. We know that they're hiding things. But in the United States, the people actually believe that they're getting honest answers from the press. And these are 4 Russian people telling my wife and I this. So it's so bad in the United States. I think in China, the press is much more freer than this. I think you'll get much more open press anywhere in the world. And when I'm, in Europe, I just love the press. I mean, I was at the Rome Film Festival, and they were covering 9/11. Well, I was in this hotel the next morning. There had to be 7 papers that had 9/11 on the front page talking about what happened on 9/11. Because it's, we were part of the Rome Film Festival, and I did a movie there, and we spoke on it. We had a big, about 500 people afterwards talking about 9/11. And it was, that's at least 6 papers, front page, talking about 9/11. So it's so bad in the United States, and you say, how do we change that? Well, I don't know. I find it impossible, because you can't talk to the press, and these are the only people you can talk to get the word out. And this is our biggest problem. The media is so bad. It's worse here than any place in the world as far as I'm concerned. And I personally don't know what to do. So I'm lucky the fact that I can get on shows like this. I just keep talking, saying my thing, and hopefully it comes out. The real truth.
Yeah. Well, we have to be the media ourselves, obviously.
Yeah.
And again, folks just tuning in, we've got about a half hour left in the program, and we do encourage the listeners to call in with questions like that were just asked. The number is 702-879-4770. Again, it's 702-879-4770. But to stick with that question, I know that Dale Pierce, when we spoke with him when he was on with Bill Simon from Veterans for Peace, Dale had taken the initiative. He forced the issue with the local anti-war organizations who were not dealing with the 9/11 lie, which as far as the wars being based on the 9/11 lie. And so Dale took it to him. He took the information from architects and engineers and brought it to the anti-war organizations in his community that were not dealing with it. Dale, would you like to touch a little on that, Dale Pierce?
Yeah, I simply read their charter to them that they are there to educate the public and explain, you can argue this war is good and that war is bad, but once I gave them the evidence, and half of them, when I asked them about Building 7, half of them couldn't raise their hand that they knew about the building. So it's like, hey, this was the biggest event that sent us into all these wars, and you don't know about the third skyscraper? So they jumped on board, and basically it's been taking over my life ever since. I'm putting in a lot of hours. I've joined up at the junior college to take a social media class so I can reach out to people, particularly my fellow firefighters. I signed an oath. It might have been decades ago, but I signed that oath, and my fellow firefighters aren't fulfilling their mission. So another thing I'm doing, I'm going to Toastmasters, and I'm getting my fellow firefighters to go to Toastmasters. We're learning how to speak in a professional manner and to stick to the facts. And what we want to do is simply, we need to embarrass our professionals. We need to go where they feel cozy on the internet. For instance, firefighters have a real problem right now. They all have the training, and they basically know, and they're trying to hide it. And right now, it's an international disaster waiting to happen. I mean, it's not just U.S. firefighters, but worldwide. They should have woken up, and their code of ethics demands they take care of each other, and they're ignoring the fact that they are required to go into a high-rise building and fight an office fire that is now, by NIST, can collapse in 6.5 seconds at free fall speed. It's just amazing what a ripe environment we got to embarrass these people. If we can show up at the AIA and just ask, as non-architects, simple questions, and if they can't answer, we can point right to their code of ethics. And perhaps we can embarrass them if we do it correctly. What happened to American pride? These buildings fall down, and all of our contractors just jumped on it because it was popular. I'm in the construction trades, and it's deafening, the silence. It's maybe 3% of contractors will acknowledge this. So until we take it to our local people around us, our brother-in-laws, our family members, our cousins, our friends, and ask them, hey, you're an architect, you're an engineer, you're a firefighter, what do you plan to do about this? It's been 12 years, and they're all guilty of derelict of duty. It doesn't matter which direction they go, they failed to fulfill their duty. At the very least, they should be, architects and engineers should be signing the petition for architects and engineers, even if they disagree. They should have that out there. They should not be ignoring it.
We have to take it to them, yes.
We got to take it to them. We need veterans that have lost their legs. We need people like me that have lost loved ones, and ask our professionals and then write to the papers. We need to do whatever you can. In Cincinnati, they're spraying Building 7 on the freeways and doing so much damage that the local news did a show on it, and they didn't know who to go to, so they called up architects and engineers and got them all sorts of time. Free fall, 911 free fall radio that specializes in the destruction of the world buildings. They have started a simple program of people calling into Washington Journal and catching our congressmen, our senators, and our generals, and asking them, hey, what about Building 7? They all scratch their heads and say, that's a conspiracy theory. You know, that's compiling now to just, history is going to be embarrassing for us. For instance, when the Nazis shot down the first P-51 Mustang over Berlin, when they discovered it, Hermann Goering and the rest of the Nazis came out there and looked at this craft and realized their gig was up, man. We had a long-range escort fighter. It basically met the end of their stuff and their gig, and they had to make that go away. So they tried to justify that it got shot down in France and glided all the way. That didn't work out, and the other things didn't work out. So Hermann Goering just ordered his generals not to see it. And that's what our professionals are doing with Number 7. They're calling us conspiracy theorists on issues that are real. For instance, leading up to September 11th, I was going off of things like Operation Northwoods, the Vietnam War, how the whole Gulf Compton was a scam. You know, these weren't theories. These were the real things, but everyone refers that as a theory. We need to separate theories from real-life issues. A theory is the official version of what happened on 9/11.
Thank you, Dale. I was just reading something here from the Architects and Engineers documentary, 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, and folks can find that on the internet at www.911expertsspeakout.org. And as the documentary, and Bob McIlvaine is featured in the documentary along with our friend Dr. Bob Bowman, as the film opens up, there's text in the beginning. You know, there's no sound or pictures, it's just text. And it reads as this: why revisit 9/11? Our world changed that day. 2,744 lives lost in New York and counting. 1 million lives lost in Afghanistan and Iraq and counting. 6,000 U.S. troops lost in the war on terror and counting. 4.5 trillion war on terror cost to U.S. taxpayers and counting. Precious civil liberties removed by the Patriot Act, Military Commissions Act, Department of Homeland Security, Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA of 2012. Today, Americans can be subject to search and seizure without a warrant, detained or imprisoned indefinitely, without charge, without evidence, without a lawyer, without a trial, or even tortured or assassinated merely for being accused of being associated with terrorism. Ignoring the World Trade Center evidence is no longer an option. And I think, boy, going back to the question asked earlier, how do we rekindle interest in 9/11 truth? That little bit right there, we tie it to what's happening to us today, and point that out. What more can we do in that regards? I think as Dale was talking about, confronting the firefighters and the architects, putting them on the spot. What do you say about the? Mm-hmm.
We need to do precisely the same things with respect to, or with regards to, and you use the correct word, misleadership of the so-called progressives, the so-called anti-war. I say so-called because this misleadership is anything but providing genuine, honest, for real leadership. They're actually working really as they're complicit. They're providing political cover for you know, the in this case right now, with the Democratic Party. And this is unfortunate, but what we need to do is, first of all, be cognizant of it, be aware of it, and we need to call them out. We need to call them out for what they are, hypocrites, all right? We need to not address, it's not about the misleadership. Who we want to reach are the rank and file, everyday, ordinary, black, white, brown, red, and yellow people. That's who we want to reach. Damn the misleadership. Who will they have to lead once the people become the leaders? Who will they have to lead when the people wake up, and they are waking up steadily, and they see that they have been, I keep using Malcolm's word, bamboozled, all right? And I also want to address something else, and that is in terms of how we, quote-unquote, rekindle. Well, frankly, the 911 phenomenon, if you will, I think is already rekindled. But you don't expect to see that on NBC. Don't expect to see it on CBS, ABC, Fox News, CBS. Don't expect to see it there. That's not where we go to get our news. As a matter of fact, I've been finding more and more that these so-called news agencies, less and less people are even paying attention to them anymore. Mm-hmm. People generally are saying that they know that it's a lie. When I say it, yeah, I'm not talking about 911. I'm talking about in general, across the board, that this news media is no news media at all. So we need to focus on our attentions, our actions, our efforts in being our own media, like this program. And there are other programs out there that are like this program, all right? That's what we need to focus on. Each one teach one, each one reach one. That's how we grow. That's not only grow, but that's how we get the information out there. I think 911 has never gone away. Let's understand that. It never went away. The media would have us, the corporate stream media would have us believe it went away. Well, just because they swept it under the rug, so what? We didn't. As a matter of fact, if anything, we're tearing the whole rug up. We're pulling the rug up to expose the entire floor. Okay, so I think we really need to understand that. We need to get out of this trap that we allow ourselves, particularly in this nation, in the United States, we allow ourselves to be trapped. Sometimes I think we actually can trap ourselves because we believe to some degree what the corporate stream media is saying, and we think, oh, if they don't cover it, it must not be happening. Or if it's happening, nobody's paying attention. But that's not true, whether they cover it or not. It is happening. It is growing. People are waking up. But don't expect to see it on ABC, CBS, PBS, NBC, Fox News. You're just not going to see it there for the most part. But you will see it in your alternative media. That's what it's all about. So I'm hopeful. I'm not Pollyanna by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm extremely hopeful in terms of what we called back in the day the power of the people. Let's not relinquish that power. Let's not relinquish it. We give it up too many times, too easily. We have the power if we would just use it, and use it collectively. So I'm down on that.
Larry, are you trying to say the official version of what happened on 9/11 is a conspiracy theory?
You betcha. You betcha. You betcha.
And as Bob Bowman used to say, the most ridiculous conspiracy theory of them all was the government's official theory, and he's right about that.
Yeah, I mean, we got to suspend the law of physics and periodic table of elements, common sense, protocol, firefighter protocol, crime scene. It just goes on and on. I mean, history is going to be cruel to us when they write about us. We gave it up without even a shot fired in the right direction.
Yes, and it comes back to us, and we just had Bike Week here in Daytona Beach this past week, and the bikers from all over to come here, hundreds of thousands, and it was a real nice week. And as Larry and Dave Corso already know, our group here in Daytona Beach has been doing a weekly anti-war 9/11 truth demonstration every Thursday night in Daytona Beach since December of 2005, where we don't just put signs up, we hand out flyers and DVDs. And again, it bothers me that there's even two movements identified that way. The 9/11 wars should be stopped by focusing on the lies of the 9/11 event. But anyway, one of our signs, Dale, you'll get a kick out of this, was from the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, the Rethink 911.org campaign they had this past fall, and are currently doing right now up in Canada, across Canada, Rethink911.org. But we had the orange and blue signs right outside, right on the corner there, and the light stops at the traffic, and that's when we give the flyers and DVDs to folks and do our little spiels. But guess, this bunch of motorcycles pulls up, and the red light stopped them right at the first in line, where the big orange and blue did you know a third tower fell on 9/11, over 2,000 architects and engineers, blah, blah, blah. And these guys were New York City firefighters, and they were a motorcycle club of New York City firefighters, and they had all the patches, all the Remember 9/11, all that stuff, and they couldn't look at us because we were hitting them with the truth. We were hitting them with the truth.
And right there, it's borderline code of ethics. They're supposed to be able to talk and converse in a professional manner. We need to get stuff like that. I'm preparing a brochure, and since we rekindled tonight, the brochure is to firefighters, and rekindle to a firefighter means you didn't finish your job. You have to get up at 2 a.m, go back to the fire that you wrote a report on that was out. So it's called a rekindle. So we're starting a little pamphlet here, and it's called 911 Rekindled. We didn't finish our job. And it shows a firefighter from his back, the photograph, looking himself in the mirror in his drab before he goes in a fire. In the buildings, you got the 2 World Trade Center towers burning and number 7. And just real simple 5 questions to firefighters. How do you explain this building falling? So how they're going to get out of this?
I'm sorry.
How they're going to get out of this, I don't know. But they're starting to distort reality to fit their preconceived conception. It's a tinderbox inside of these fire stations right now. They can't get on social media because they're inappropriate. They can't talk about it in the fire station because it's too emotional. So how are they going to handle when the public starts asking them at county fairs and fundraisers?
And that's the missing link, Dale, is we the public confronting them.
Yep.
Because otherwise they're running around with their stars and stripes patches. Remember 9/11, and walking around waiting to be called heroes. And I'm tired of this crap, man. And that, I thought that was a great snapshot of the whole thing was our weekly demo. And the light turning red just when it did, where this whole bunch of New York City firefighters with their leather, their official patches, we won't forget and all that,
Well, they never
bullshit.
Knew.
It's bullshit. They know that fire doesn't make skyscrapers blow up in the dust. These guys know it's more easier and convenient for them to walk around with the flag and USA and remember our brothers. Bullshit. Those brothers of them have been sold out.
Their pay raises after September 11th and their hero status is a direct conflict of interest with their code of ethics.
Yes.
It says you will not accept any benefits from your position. Well, they got the hero status, and they got these big, nice bonuses and unbelievable retirement packages.
And there's no shame. There's no shame.
When the towers collapse, a firefighter carries what's called a pass alarm, and when the firefighter goes vertical or stops moving for over 30 seconds, it gives off a horrible siren. And there was 334 pass alarms sounded off for a week after September 11th until their batteries died. Those firefighters went on top of that pile and heard that, and they went home to their stations, and they turned patriotic. And I understand the fire culture. When I was a young man fighting fires, I was taking some biology classes, and I realized that a fire goes through the forest every 4 to 7 years, basically. We had at that time over 100-something years of fire protection. You can see that the accumulation was a danger to the public, but when you bring it up in the firehouse of maybe we should let these things burn, you were shouted down because it provided them with a job. They never thought about the fact that that's endangering the public. You're letting the brush grow up, and you know it's bad, but you're getting a job out of it. They didn't stop to think that maybe we could have a job in the wintertime burning that brush that was accumulating and putting it out in the summer. So everyone's got a vested interest in this, from the news media that made a bundle off of 911 to the firefighters to the no-bid contracts. The whole America was a victim, and we get to go out and declare war on the whole world. So there we are.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Well, we're doing it, and the opening of our program each month is a mix of the Dr. Martin Luther King's Beyond Vietnam speech with Gil Scott-Heron's Work for Peace. And in there, Larry, is that line, and you say this often, Larry, in all your columns at the end, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. And you don't exactly put it in those words yourself, Larry, but you always close out with the message, do something, you know, each one reach one, each one teach one. And, you know, it looks like that's the answer, huh, Larry?
It is, absolutely. I mean, we are the answer to ourselves. I mean, you know, we've all heard the expression that goes something like, I met the enemy and he is us. Okay? Well, we are the ones who have the power. But if we don't use that, you know, we have to just stop. We've been so programmed with believing systemic nonsense that we get fed to us. I call it vomit that is fed to us by this corporate stream media. We have to be creative. I mean, that's what it's all about. We have to be creative, and it doesn't take millions and millions of people. I always like to refer to what Margaret Mead said, that we should never doubt that a small group of thoughtful people can make a difference. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And so to get back to what Dave Corso said, Dave, absolutely correct. The conspiracy is the government. It's the government lies. If there is a conspiracy, it's the government lies. That's the conspiracy theory right there. We the people, we're telling the truth. We have the power. We need to utilize it. We need to be creative, find new ways of reaching each other, talking with each other, discussing this intelligently with one another. So, yeah, I say each one reach one, each one teach one. That's what this struggle is about, and we're going to win it. We are winning it.
Yes, do something.
Yeah, you know, evil is a two-part system. Evil needs a soft place to hide. Germany, they had just enough beer and food on the table and possibility of jobs, and we're overwhelmed with television and sports and fast food. So we're distracted, and evil has rooted itself right here amongst us. Until we wake up and start talking about it. It was very difficult to talk about September 11th at first because you're just simply labeled. But now with things like the New York Safety High-Rise Initiative. We got some great tools to work with, so we need to use them. Toastmasters, what great outlet to meet people, to build life-building skills, and to build the tool you need to get the message out. So
yes,
this needs to become our way of life. We need to figure out how to speak and how to approach these people and how to get them to react.
I agree. Thank you, Dale. And you guys were mentioning the independent media and just not bothering with the corporate media that continues to betray us and betray the truth. I think pretty much everybody here knows of Jack Blood and the Jack Blood Show, DeadlineLive.info. Well, Jack's back on air on his old time slot, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Every day, Monday to Friday, and he's broadcasting on the Micro Effect network. It's themicroeffect.com. And I did exchange some emails with Jack earlier and mentioned that Bob McIlvaine was going to be joining us tonight. And Bob, Jack Blood made a point of asking that we say hello to you for him and let you know he was asking for you. And I don't know when's the last time you've been on with Jack Blood, but hopefully he'll have you on sometime soon to talk about the high-rise safety initiative that's going on in New York City, because there is just a certain window of time with this, is there not, Bob, as far as getting signatures on these petitions?
Well, yeah, I forget what the exact date is, and the money they're trying to raise, though, is for the petitioners.
Yes.
You need like $250,000, and I think by June 1st, I don't know the exact dates. But yes, you have to have so many signatures. And, of course, they say I think you have to need 35 now and then 70 by a certain date. Okay? So you're hiring petitioners to go out. So that's where the money that's being donated now goes to. But the thing is, like the first 30, you have to go, like I think they want to get 75,000 first and then 100,000 second, because they'll do everything in their power to negate any petition signed. They might have become, they're going to look into it, find out if, like I might go up to New York and sign a petition and say, oh, yeah, I live in New York, and, but then they might investigate me and find out, no, I really live in Pennsylvania. You know what I mean? So you got to make sure you have plenty above what the minimum is, which I think at the first stage is like 30,000.
So this is to get on the.
So that's where all the money will go, is to pay for those petitioners. You have to have professional petitioners out on the street. And then you have to get way above what is the minimum of each stage. Do you understand that? Yeah.
I do, yes. And so time is important here, folks. And you do want to get some contributions over to highrisesafetynyc.org so they can get these professional petitioners out there on the streets of New York, gathering enough signatures, legitimate signatures, to get this thing on the ballot in November. So please share this with folks. highrisesafetynyc.org, and mention Bob McIlvaine. We're coming down to the end here. Bob, is there anything else you wanted to share with the listeners before we...
Well, I just wanted to jump on what we just had the conversation about. Mm-hmm. Two things, like... I really get angry. Well, I try not to, but I do get angry at 9/11 people. I mean, there's not many people out there, and I know there's a lot of 9/11 family members who believe what I believe, but they won't come out and say it. And the anger that people have when you get involved in this, especially if you're a family. I mean, I live with anger, and I find it very important to keep that anger because, I just think it's the other side of happiness, or, I guess, I don't know what, I guess it is the other side of happiness or contentment. But I have to keep angry. It's very important for me to keep that anger. But the thing is, I don't go to a job every day. I don't express that anger to cohorts because they would probably say, well, you're an idiot. You're a conspiracy theorist. And I just know from my wife, she can't go out. She has it very difficult. She supports me 100%, But she can't talk to her friends about this because they look at her glassy-eyed, because if you put no time into it, and it's important to go out and talk about it, it's difficult. And I know 9/11 family members, they just say, I had to drop out of this. Like, I love working for Peaceful Tomorrows because I feel good about myself. I don't feel hate. I don't feel that anger. You know, when you're doing this, you start thinking hate. I hate this administration. I hate this. And that's a tough way to live. And you really have to balance, you know, your life, because I just can't go out with my wife every night and talk about 9/11. She doesn't want. She wants peace. She doesn't want me to keep bringing up Bobby. She wants to talk about, you know, the good things in life, about our grandchildren, and it's very difficult. And that goes for a lot of people. And another thing, and I think this is a very important part, the further I get into this, I do fear for my life, and that's a big thing. You know, we can talk about these things, but when you come down to the nitty gritty, I keep talking about this country was involved in the death and the murder of my son. Well, if suddenly I'm getting a platform around the world, I have to think about dying, because that's what's going to happen to me. I mean, this is Martin Luther King. This was Malcolm X. You know, back then with Martin Luther King, he was allowed on TV, and he used to speak truth to power. Well, they couldn't allow that. Well, the system won't allow this. The more truthful you get, the more involved you get into it, you know, there's a good chance you're going to die. I mean, look at Wellstone. You know, all politicians, they know if they jumped on the bandwagon of this, they're done. First of all, they'd be out of office, and they come too close, they'll be dead within weeks. You know, so that is a fear of people. You know, that number one being that you will die, because if you get too close, they're going to end it real fast. And that's happened to people in the 9/11 movement.
Yes.
So that is a big fear. You know, we can talk about it, but then when we really get to the power structure, you know, then I worry about it. You know, I'm always looking over my shoulder. Yeah, because the more you're involved in it, you know, if you're getting to a lot of people, you start getting to a lot of people, as a Zach Kennedy, as Martin Luther King, Africa, and Malcolm X. You know, they spoke truth to that power, and look what happened to them. And every politician knows that. Hey, they can't get to that position because they're the only people that can mobilize millions upon millions of people. And I believe what Larry said, you have to believe in what, you know, Margaret Mead said, that, you know, the small group of people can make a difference. But eventually you're going to start talking about a lot of people, and we're, you know, you're going right at the heart of America. And these are all lies, and everybody in Congress, the President of the United States, every president, they have to stick with the story. And it'll bring the whole country down.
Well,
so
all the more...
That's a big problem.
But that's all the more reason, Bob, for to spread the risk and strengthen numbers, to
I agree with you.
More stand with you, and not have one person be the one doing the battle. And so we've got to. I like Dale's message of putting these people on the spot: the firefighters, the architects, the anti-war people. Larry and I have been doing that for years. That's how we actually came to meet. You know, and let's just keep putting these folks on the spot, and we're gonna grow our numbers. I know we are, but we can't let one person carry the whole load. And I'm hoping that hopefully this show tonight may have encouraged a listener or two to get more involved. We're getting near time to sign off. Bob, was there anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Well, I know. Go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, just look at the other spectrum of that. My son joined the military 2 days after September 11th. He fought in Baghdad, went on to Fallujah, came back for a second tour. He shouldn't have gone on the second tour. He was already mentally ill. They didn't bring replacements in. He fought again. For all the hard work, thousands of our soldiers were poisoned with water directly out of the Tigris River, and no one's been prosecuted. That wasn't an accident. They wanted to get rid of those kids for the war crimes they committed. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter which war we're on. We're screwed if we don't do this battle.
Yes. And we owe it to all of them until Absolutely. We get to the truth. And, you know, and I don't know if I should say this with two fathers on the show, maybe not, but until we right this wrong, they've not been those who've paid the price already, Bobby and Noah. Justice has yet to be served. So we've got to right this wrong. We've got to right this wrong. Larry, do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, we have to right this wrong for Bobby and Noah, but we also have to right this wrong for the hundreds of thousands other Bobbies and Noahs out there. We have to right this wrong because we don't want more Bobbies, more Noahs. We don't want that. We've got to right this wrong. And yes, there's always the reality that some of us will pay the ultimate price, make the ultimate sacrifice. But no one of us is smart. Is it smart or is it strong as all of us? So, we've got to do what we've got to do. Martin paid the price. Kennedy paid the price. Malcolm paid the price. But hey, that's what the struggle's about. But think of the consequences. Think of the consequences if we don't do this. That's horrible. Okay? Mm-hmm. So that's all I can say. I love you guys. I'm really glad you were on. Thank you so very, very much. And that's really about all I have to say at this point.
Thank you, Larry. Okay. Larry, by the way, listeners, I do want to mention again that Larry puts out a great deal of good work in his columns and his appearances and what have you. And I want to encourage our listeners to take a few moments and go over to blackactivistwg.org. Again, that's blackactivistwg.org, and share it with others. Dale Pierce, thank you so much again for being with us and sharing your story with our audience. Is there any website or effort that you want to mention before we go off air?
Just that video you sent me on YouTube, the emergency warning for office workers. People just have to look at that and look what our professionals, the corner they painted themselves into. That is so well done to show.
Was that from the Corbett report, James Corbett?
It was off a 911 blogger.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it was showing how NIST asserted that the building fell down due to small office fires and that we need to change building codes. Well done.
Oh, good. And again, you're continuing to work with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth and trying to bridge the gap between the A&E and 9/11 Truth with the groups that are putting themselves out for stopping the 9/11 wars. So I commend your work and encourage the listeners to do the same. Bob McIlvaine, thank you again for coming on tonight with us and spending so much time with us. Is there any website or effort that you want to mention before we go off air?
Well, you mentioned the high rise. That's the thing I'm working with right now. So it really is nothing else.
Okay.
And,
again, that's
just real quickly. I love being on a show like this because you do realize, and listening to Larry and listening to Dale, it's my problem is the frustration, and I have to realize that you are making a difference as an individual, and you can't have the quick answers immediately. It just doesn't happen that way. But that's my burden because I want everyone in the world to know, and it just frustrates me so much. And I got to believe that as an individual or a small group, we are making a difference. So that's a thank you very much for having me on the show because I got to keep that in my head constantly that it can't happen immediately. So
yes,
so it is shows like this. So that means so much.
Well, thank you, Bob. And if you had not spoken up, we wouldn't have heard you. and been able to share your message. So you are being heard. And I want to restate that website is High-Rise, HIGHRISE, safety, NYC.org. Please go to the website, folks, and chip in, and let's get this initiative on the ballot this time around in New York City. And again, a film that's a great tool is the 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out. And I think that's a wonderful tool. It deals with the architects and engineers that Dale works with. It features Bob McIlvaine as far as the family members. It discusses the cognitive dissonance and how to address it, as far as people not wanting to deal with 9/11 and how we might still have a chance of reaching these folks. We got to get critical mass. If until this country deals with the 9/11 lie, we're going to keep getting what we're getting.
I cannot be silent.
Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone's got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit said work.
I cannot be